everyone! Welcome to this video about poetry. Today, we'll explore what a poem is and the 8 main topics in poetry. Explained in a simple and friendly way. Let's get started. A poem is a special style of writing that expresses feelings, ideas, or stories in a creative way. Unlike ordinary writing, poems use imagery, rhythm, sound, and emotions to make the words powerful and memorable. A poem can be short or long, serious or funny, but its main purpose is to make the reader feel, imagine, or think in a deeper way. Now that we understand what a poem is, let's look at the simple parts that make it complete. Poems can sometimes feel complicated, but there's a simple way to understand them. When we study a poem, we can look at it through 8 main topics. Just like a house has different rooms, a poem also has different parts. And to understand a poem fully, we can look at it through these 8 main areas. These topics help us see how the poem is built, how it sounds, what it means, and how we can enjoy and understand it better. Let's explore each topic one by one. Parts of a poem are the basic building blocks. A poem has lines, stanzas, a speaker, and a title. That gives us a clue about the poem's meaning. These parts work together to help the poet share ideas and feelings clearly. First, we begin with title. Title is the poem's name. It often gives clues about the theme, mood, or message. Next, we explore the type of words the poet chooses. Diction. Diction means the poet's choice of words and the style of language. Simple, emotional, formal, or poetic. Related to diction is the idea of the poet creating a character to speak. Persona. The persona is the imaginary character or voice created by the poet to narrate the poem. Speaker. The speaker is the voice that talks to us through the poem. It may be the poet or a character created by the poet. Now that we know who is speaking, let's look at the poem's lines. Lines, the basic rows of words that make up the poem. Lines create rhythm, control pacing, and shape meaning. Once we understand lines, we look at how lines are grouped. Stanzas. Stanzas are clusters of lines arranged together, just like paragraphs in prose. Each stanza usually carries one main idea or image. Next, let's move on to the different types of stanzas. Stanzas are simply groups of lines in a poem. And each group has a special name depending on how many lines it has. A 2-line stanza is called a couplet. A 3-line stanza is a tercet. A 4-line stanza is a quatrain. A 5-line stanza is a quintain. A 6-line stanza is a sestet. A 7-line stanza is a septet. And an 8-line stanza is an octave. These names make it easier to identify and describe the structure of any poem. Voice. Voice is the distinct tone, personality, or attitude expressed in the poem's language. Next, let's see how poets break their lines. Line breaks are the places where lines end. Poets use them to create emphasis, suspense, or rhythm. Now we focus on the exact words the poet chooses. Word choice refers to the specific vocabulary the poet selects to express feelings, ideas, and imagery. And finally, the marks that guide how we read the poem. Punctuation. Punctuation like commas, dashes, and full stops. Controls pauses, speed, and meaning within a poem. Now that we've explored the building blocks of a poem, let's move to part 2. The sound devices that add music to poetry. Sound devices are ways poets use sound to make a poem musical and enjoyable. They help create rhythm, rhyme, and a smooth flow that makes the poem pleasing to read or listen to. Let's look at one by one. First, we begin with rhyme, the repetition of similar ending sounds in words. Rhyme creates musical quality and gives the poem a pleasing pattern. Once we feel the rhyme, we look at the beat beneath the words. Rhythm. Rhythm is the natural flow of stressed and unstressed syllables. It is the heartbeat of the poem, controlling speed and movement. To understand rhythm more deeply, we study when it becomes regular and measured. Meter is the structured pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables. It gives poems a predictable, repeated beat. Now let's move from beat to sound repetition within words. Alliteration. Alliteration repeats the same initial consonant sound in nearby words. It adds music, unity, and emphasis. After consonants, we focus on repeating vowel sounds. Assonance is the repetition of vowel sounds inside nearby words. It creates internal echo and softness. Next, we return to consonant sounds, but this time inside or at the end of words. Consonants repeats consonant sounds in the middle or end of words. It adds smoothness and harmony to the line. Sound can also be shaped by intentional pauses. A caesura is a deliberate pause or break inside a line. It adds tension, drama, or emotional weight. Now, let's look at rhymes that appear inside the line. Internal rhyme is when a word in the middle of a line rhymes with another word in the same line. It brings music into the line itself. Next, we return to rhymes that appear at the ends of lines. End rhyme. End rhyme occurs at the end of lines and forms a rhyme scheme. It gives the poem order and musical pattern. Sometimes rhymes don't match perfectly, and poets use this on purpose. Slant rhyme or near rhyme. Slant rhyme is when two words sound similar, but not exactly the same. It creates a softer, more subtle musical effect. And finally, there are rhymes that look correct on paper, but sound different when spoken. I rhyme occurs when two words look like they rhyme in writing, but do not rhyme in pronunciation. It is often seen in older poems. Now that we understand how poetry sounds, let's explore what poems mean. Moving on to part 3, meaning. Meaning is the heart of the poem. The message, idea, or emotion the poet wants to express. Understanding the meaning helps us connect with the poem and feel what the poet is trying to say. We begin part 3 with the theme, the central idea or message that runs through the poem. It is what the poet wants us to think about, feel, or understand. Once we know the theme, we look at the poet's attitude toward it. Tone is the poet's or speaker's attitude toward the subject. It might be serious, joyful, angry, calm, sarcastic, or reflective. After tone, we explore how the poem makes the reader feel. Mood. Mood is the emotional atmosphere created by the poem. It is the feeling the reader experiences, such as peace, sadness, fear, or excitement. Now, we move to the message the poet clearly or indirectly gives us. Message. The message is the lesson, insight, or moral that the poem communicates. It is what the poet wants us to take away from the poem. To understand the message better, we ask, why was the poem written? Purpose refers to the poet's reason for writing the poem. To express emotion, to describe, to entertain, to warn, or to teach. Next, we identify what the poem is mainly talking about. The subject is the topic or main idea of the poem, like nature, love, war, childhood, or death. Understanding the subject becomes deeper when we consider the background of the poem. Context includes the poet's life, the historical period, and social or cultural factors. These help explain why the poem was written and how to interpret it. From context, we move to the wider feeling created throughout the poem. Atmosphere is the overall emotional environment of the poem. It may be peaceful, tense, mysterious, joyful, or haunting. Finally, we look at how the poem is told from which point of view. Point of view refers to the perspective from which the poem is narrated. It can be first person I, we, third person he, she, they, or sometimes an unusual perspective. Now that we understand the deeper meaning behind poems, let's move on to part 4, the literary devices that bring poetry to life. Literary devices are creative techniques used to make writing more vivid, emotional, and powerful. They help create images in our mind, deepen feelings, and make a poem more memorable. We begin with a simile, a comparison using like or as. It helps the reader imagine clearly by showing similarity between two different things. After simile, we look at a stronger type of comparison. A metaphor directly states that one thing is another. It creates powerful imagery by connecting ideas in unexpected ways. Once we understand comparisons, we explore how poets bring objects to life. Personification gives human qualities to non-human things, like animals, objects, or ideas. It makes images more vivid and emotional. From human-like qualities, we move to words that imitate natural sounds. Onomatopoeia uses sound-imitating words like buzz, bang, and whisper. It brings sound into the reader's imagination. Next, we explore symbols that represent bigger ideas. Symbolism uses objects, colors, or actions to represent deeper meanings, like a dove symbolizing peace. After symbols, we focus on repeating words for effect. Repetition. Repetition is the deliberate repeating of words or phrases. It strengthens ideas, creates rhythm, and adds emphasis. Now we look at lines that continue without pause. Enjambment. Enjambment occurs when a line runs on to the next without punctuation. It creates flow, suspense, and natural movement. To make images even sharper, poets use descriptive language appealing to the senses. Imagery uses vivid descriptions related to sight, sound, touch, taste, smell, or movement. It allows the reader to experience the poem. Next, we look at types of imagery. Types of imagery. Let's explore one by one. Visual imagery. Visual imagery appeals to the sense of sight by creating clear pictures in the mind. From sight, we move to sound. Auditory imagery. Auditory imagery appeals to the sense of hearing, describing sounds vividly. Next, the sense of touch. Tactile imagery. Tactile imagery appeals to the sense of touch, describing textures, temperatures, or physical sensations. Then we move to the sense of smell. Olfactory imagery. Olfactory imagery appeals to the sense of smell, describing scents or odors. Now we move to taste. Gustatory imagery. Gustatory imagery appeals to the sense of taste, describing flavors. Finally, imagery that shows movement. Kinesthetic imagery. Kinesthetic imagery describes movement, physical action, or body tension. It creates a sense of motion and energy. Hyperbole. Hyperbole is extreme exaggeration, used to make a point stronger or more dramatic. From exaggeration, we move to references to other texts or events. Allusion. An allusion is a reference to a famous person, story, event, or text. It adds depth and meaning with just a few words. Now, let's explore meaning that says one thing but implies another. Irony occurs when the literal meaning is opposite to the intended meaning. It is often used for humor, critique, or surprise. Next, we look at two opposite words placed together. Oxymoron. An oxymoron combines contradictory words, like sweet sorrow or deafening silence. It creates a striking effect. Then we look at contradictions that reveal truth. Paradox. A paradox is a statement that appears impossible or contradictory, but reveals a deeper truth. Like less is more. After paradox, we go to wordplay. Pun. A pun is a humorous play on words, using multiple meanings or similar sounds to create a joke or clever twist. Now we focus on repeated beginnings of lines. A NAFR repeats words or phrases at the beginning of successive lines, creating rhythm and emphasis. After repeated beginnings, we look at repeated endings. A PIFR repeats words or phrases at the end of successive lines. It highlights important ideas and adds musicality. Next, we explore expressions that mean more than the literal words. Idioms. Idioms are common expressions with meanings different from their literal wording, like break the ice or a piece of cake. Now we turn to devices where one thing represents another. Metonymy replaces a word with something closely related to it. For example, the crown meaning the king or the monarchy. And closely related to metonymy is synecdoche. Synecdoche. Synecdoche uses a part to represent the whole, or the whole to represent a part. Like saying all hands on deck to mean all workers must help. Now let's quickly move to the different types of imagery. Now that we've explored how poets enhance meaning with literary devices, let's move to part 5, the different forms and types of poems. Form is the type or style of the poem. It shows whether the poem is long or short, rhymed or unrhymed, or written in a special pattern. Form helps give the poem its unique personality. Now we'll look at the different forms poems can take. Each form gives the poem its own shape, rules, and personality. Let's go through them one by one. Sonnet. A sonnet is a 14-line poem with a fixed rhyme scheme. Often formal and reflective, sonnets usually explore love, time, or deep ideas. From the tightly structured sonnet, we jump to a very short, image-focused form from Japan. A haiku is a 3-line Japanese poem following a 5-7 5-syllable pattern. Haiku capture a single moment in nature or a sudden emotion. Next is a form that throws away strict rules and speaks freely. Free verse is poetry without a fixed rhyme or rhythm. It follows the poem's own natural flow and the poet's voice. Some poems tell stories instead of focusing on feeling. Let's see an example. A ballad is a poem that tells a story, often with repeated lines and a musical quality. Ballads are dramatic and easy to remember like sung tailies. Now we move to a poem that praises a person, object, or idea. Ode. An ode is a formal poem of praise. It celebrates and honors something important with dignity and feeling. From praise we move to the grand-scale epics that cover huge adventures. Epic. An epic is a long poem about heroes, journeys, and great deeds. Epics tell sweeping stories of culture and courage. Next, something light and playful. A limerick is a funny 5-line poem with a strong, bouncy rhythm and a humorous twist. It's quick, clever, and often silly. From laughter we move to loss, a more somber form. Elegy? An elegy is a poem of sorrow or mourning written to remember someone who has died. It comforts, reflects, and honors the lost. Next is a more personal, emotion-focused form. Lyric. A lyric is a short, emotional poem that expresses personal feelings or thoughts. Lyric poems are intimate and musical. Now a playful structural trick: acrostic poems. Acrostic. In an acrostic poem, the first letters of each line spell out a word or message. It's a clever way to hide meaning in plain sight. From hidden messages, we move to poems that draw shapes. Shape or concrete poem. A shape or concrete poem arranges words on the page, so the text itself forms a visual shape related to the subject. Here the look is as important as the words. Now a compact, patterned 5-line form. Cinquin. A cinquin is a 5-line poem that follows a specific syllable or word pattern. It's short, precise, and focused on image or idea. Next is a strict form built on repetition. Villanelle. A villanelle is a 19-line poem with repeated refrains and a fixed rhyme scheme. Its repeated lines create a haunting, circular effect. Now a form that sounds like natural speech but keeps a beat. Blank verse. Blank verse is unrhymed poetry written in a regular meter, usually iambic pentameter. It's formal yet flexible, often used in dramatic or narrative poetry. From Japan again, a longer lyrical form. Tanka. A tanka is a 5-line Japanese poem with a 5-7-5-7 7-syllable pattern. It expands the haiku's moment with an added emotional or reflective turn. And finally, a poem built from pairs. Couplet poem. A couplet poem is made entirely of 2-line units. Each pair often rhymes and completes an idea. Couplets can be playful, wise, or dramatic depending on tone. These are the main poetic forms from short, image-rich haiku to long, storytelling epics. Each form offers different possibilities. The poet chooses one to match the idea, feeling, or story they want to share. Structure refers to the way a poem is organized. The order of lines, stanzas, rhythms, and ideas. A poem's structure helps it flow smoothly and shows where important changes or shifts happen. Now let's look at patterns within stanzas themselves. Stanza pattern. Stanza pattern refers to whether the stanzas are uniform or varied. Regular patterns create order, while irregular patterns may show chaos or emotion. Number of stanzas. How many groups of lines are in the poem? More stanzas can slow the pace. Fewer stanzas can make it feel intense and compact. Once we know the stanza count, we look at the length of individual lines. Line length refers to how long or short each line is. Short lines can create urgency, while long lines can give a flowing, reflective feeling. Next, we consider how lines rhyme with each other. Rhyme scheme is the pattern of rhymes at the ends of lines, labeled with letters. Like ABAB or AABB. It gives musicality and structure to the poem. After rhyme, we pay attention to the punctuation style in the poem. Punctuation style. Punctuation, commas, full stops, dashes, ellipses. Controls pauses, emphasis, and the pace of reading. Next, we focus on the point where the poem changes tone or direction. Volta is a shift or turn in thought, argument, or emotion. It often marks a change in perspective or insight. Very important in sonnets. And finally, we look at repeated structures within lines or stanzas. Parallelism. Parallelism repeats similar grammatical structures, phrases, or patterns. It emphasizes ideas and creates rhythm. Now that we understand the structure of poems, we move to Part 7, Poetic Techniques. The methods poets use to highlight contrasts, comparisons, and emotions. Poetic techniques are special methods used to make poems stronger and more expressive. They include tools like contrast, repetition, and shifts in tone or mood, all helping key ideas stand out. We begin with contrast, placing opposite ideas, images, or emotions close together. This highlights differences and creates tension or emphasis. Once we understand contrast, we explore how poets show similarities. Comparison shows the likeness between two things, often using similes or metaphors. It helps the reader understand concepts more clearly. Next, we look at repetition within the poem. A refrain is a line or group of lines repeated throughout a poem, usually at the end of stanzas. It emphasizes key ideas and creates rhythm. Now let's examine changes in attitude within the poem. Tone shift is when the speaker's attitude or feeling changes during the poem. It can show conflict, development, or surprise. Next, we see how emotions for the reader can also change. Mood shift occurs when the emotional atmosphere of the poem changes. It can reflect turning points in the story or theme. After mood, we look at changes in imagery. Imagery shift is when the type or focus of imagery changes, visual, auditory, tactile, etc. It can highlight changes in theme, tone, or perspective. Finally, we explore how placing ideas or images side by side can create meaning. Juxtaposition places contrasting ideas, images, or words close together. It creates emphasis, irony, or highlights differences. Having explored the poet's techniques, we now move to Part 8, Interpretation Skills. How we, as readers, understand and analyze poetry deeply. Interpretation skills are what we use to truly understand and enjoy a poem. They help us discover hidden meanings, follow the poet's message, and connect the poem to our own experiences. We start with paraphrasing, restating the poem's lines or ideas in your own words. This shows that you understand the content clearly. Once we can paraphrase, we look for deeper meanings that are not directly stated. Hidden meanings, or subtext, are ideas, emotions, or messages implied rather than directly expressed. Finding them helps us uncover the poet's deeper intentions. After subtext, we explore why the poet wrote the poem. Analyzing the poet's intention involves understanding why the poem was written. It could be to express emotion, teach a lesson, or share a personal or social message. Now, we consider the effect the poem has on the reader. This skill involves describing how the poem makes the reader feel. We explain why certain words, images, or sounds create particular emotions. Next, we look at the broader background surrounding the poem. Cultural and social context includes the historical period, societal conditions, and cultural factors that influence the poem. It helps us interpret symbols, themes, and ideas more accurately. And finally, we connect the poem to our own experiences. This skill involves relating the ideas, messages, or emotions in the poem to personal experiences or real-world situations. It makes the poem meaningful beyond the page. And with that, we have completed all 8 parts of poetry study from understanding. The building blocks, sound, meaning, and literary devices. To forms, structure, techniques, and interpretation skills. Mastering these skills allows you to read, analyze, and appreciate any poem with confidence. You've now explored the complete world of poetry, from the tiniest details to the biggest ideas. Parts of a poem, sound devices, meaning, literary devices, forms, structure, poetic techniques, interpretation skills. By learning these 8 essential parts, you can now read any poem with confidence, understand its depth, and appreciate the beauty behind every word, line, and stanza. Remember, poetry is not just words on a page. It's an experience, a feeling, and a story waiting to be discovered. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more English and literature study guides. And keep reading poems. The more you explore, the more you'll understand and feel their magic.